Maybe you'll recognize this particular drawing. This is horse evolution, or so we're told. We are told that this little tiny creature at the end of this line, or you might say at the beginning, about the size of a fox terrier, Eohippus or Don horse, eventually evolved up into modern equus, modern equine, modern horse. And we are told that these fossils that we have found prove this transition from this little bitty horse-like creature all the way up to modern horse. In fact, I was just up at the Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. Your tax dollars paid for me to visit the Washington Natural History Museum. Anybody that wants to can walk in there for free. I did. I was along with probably several thousand children that day, walking in for free because our tax dollars have paid to set up this particular museum. I walked up to the shrine of horse evolution. I bet this particular exhibit cost $250,000. And it was exactly what you see depicted in this picture. That tiny Eohippus evolving into modern horse. And they said this was proof that horses evolved over multiplied millions of years. You know the only problem with this? The only problem with this is the evolutionists themselves admit that this is not the case. George Gaylord Simpson said, and this was in 1953, the uniform continuous transformation of Hyracotherium or Eohippus into equus, so dear to the hearts of generations of textbook writers, never happened in nature. Where did it happen? On the pages of their textbooks. And that's the only place. Folks, this is not a creationist. This man was a staunch evolutionist. Read with me what Stephen Jay Gould said. Once ensconced in textbooks, misinformation. Now stop right there if you will. What kind of information? Misinformation. What did Daniel Dennett say he was going to do with your children at his earliest opportunity? He said he was going to disabuse them of the idea that creation is true, and he was going to tell them that anyone who teaches their children creation is spreading falsehoods. And yet we have on record Stephen Jay Gould himself saying that the information that was used to teach evolution, much of it or some of it in his opinion here, is misinformation. Now continue with me. He says, it becomes cocooned and effectively permanent because, as stated above, textbooks copy from previous text. I've written 2 essays on this lamentable practice. One on the amusingly perennial description of the Eohippus or Don horse as the size of a fox terrier, even though most authors, including yours truly, have no idea of the dimensions of the breed. Here's what angers me about Stephen Jay Gould's statement. Look how he approaches this. The amusingly perennial idea. Is it amusing to you that someone would know for 50 years that a piece of evidence is false and still use it to tell a child that his parent is a liar? Is that funny to you? Because it's not funny to me. It's not amusing to me that this misinformation has become cocooned in these textbooks and is used to propagate evolution even though we've known it's false for 50 years. That's not funny to me. And I think something needs to be done about it. And what needs to be done is people need to have the opportunity to look at this information or misinformation with an open mind and to study it carefully and to consider it critically. This particular creature is supposed to be, his name means the basal root ancestor, Ardipithecus ramidus Kadaba. He was on the front of Time magazine. And he was said to be the basal root ancestor. And what that means is an ancestor to humans that was almost the very first, right at the base, right at the root of the tree. Well, they said about this particular creature, well, we found about 11 bone fragments from 5 different individuals. So you're averaging about 2 bone fragments per individual. And then they said, now researchers haven't found enough bone fragments to reconstruct what Ardipithecus ramidus Kadaba looked like. Well, I wish they would have told that to the Time magazine article illustrator. because it sure looks like on the cover of Time magazine, they feel like they've got a pretty good idea of what he looked like. In fact, he's staring at you knowingly and intelligently through the underbrush there, isn't he? Oh, and yet they say to us, they found a single toe bone. And they have a huge picture of the toe bone in their article, and they say this toe bone proves that the creature walked upright. Now, there are a lot of things that would have to be involved for a creature to walk upright. His hips would have to be placed correctly. His leg bones would have to be the proper stature and size and dimensions. All kinds of things would need to be in place, and it would be hard to tell from a toe bone if a creature walked upright or not. But that's not what's most disturbing to me about this particular find. This toe bone that they say proves that this creature walked upright, let me tell you what else they say about it. They say, oh, the toe bone? Well, it was separated in time by several 100,000 years, and it was found 10 miles away from the rest of them. Now, I don't agree at all with the evolutionary dating methods. But they said, we found 11 bones of 5 different specimens, averaging about 2 bones per specimen. And we found a toe bone after we got in our car and drove for 10 minutes at 60 miles an hour. And got out, stuck a shovel in the ground, pulled out a toe bone that wasn't connected in any way to the other bones that we found. In fact, so much was not connected that we dated it several 100,000 years separate. But this toe bone is what proves that whatever creature had those 11 other specimens walked on 2 legs upright. Now, is that good science to you? I certainly think you'll see that it is not. You might recall Piltdown Man. In 1912, Piltdown Man was hailed as the missing link. We were told in 1912 that this was evidence that humans evolved from ape-like creatures. In fact, over 500 articles were written discussing Piltdown Man. In 1925, at the Scopes monkey trial, as it's referred to, the scientific experts wrote in their documents that Piltdown Man was evidence that humans evolved from ape-like creatures. For 40 years, Piltdown Man was analyzed and looked at by the most educated people in the world. And they said, oh, absolutely, this is the missing link. This is the link between humans and ape-like creatures. And yet in 1952, 40 years after Piltdown Man was discovered, they took a more critical look, a closer look, a more open-minded look, and they discovered, Piltdown Man was constructed using the skull of a human and the jawbone of a orangutan that was artificially colored to look old and whose teeth were filed down to fit with the human skull. And yet for 40 years it was hailed as a link between humans and monkeys. What's the problem here? Do you know what the problem is? The problem is looking at evolutionary information critically with an open mind and analyzing it carefully proves that evolution did not take place. And still we are forced to the conclusion that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth.